Okay, welcome to Mergetool.com's ISV session. I hope that's what you thought. There's a lot of people here. So only going to show you this one a little, but just notice the version up here. We already work and run in that version, by the way. So let's switch to something we all know. This one is 2009 and 13 in here, and I'm going to run this PowerPoint. So what is Mergetool.com? We are a non-selling ISV focused on product tools, and we also do a bunch of training for NAV. We have, you can say, 4 products. 2 of them are really one product. So we have an Easy Security solution with roles and logins. We have a field level and data security solution. We have a light product that is basically free for everybody to add to a customer's license, as long as the current Microsoft won't charge you anything either for that one. And then we have the Mergetool. The Mergetool is, the history traces back almost 18 years now, so it's getting out of routine soon. But it has been constantly updating. It works with every version of NAV code, including the latest one, actually. And as a partner, you have full access to that one. We made an agreement with Microsoft that it's in every development license in the world, actually, have access to the Mergetool, not customers, but partners. We also do a whole bunch of training classes. We do standard seaside training. We do a lot of upgrade your knowledge. So if you know everything about the classic environment and you really want to know something about the new things, that's one of our real classes that fills up a lot. We do Mergetool classes, and we do a whole bunch of online lunch and learn sessions from 30 minutes to 3-4 hours or so on a specific subject where we have some knowledge. We're based in Atlanta, and the company was founded in 2010. But let's look at the Easy Security solution. It is a complete solution for NAV Security, and it contains 2 pieces, and you can buy them each individually. The field level action and data security is beyond what you can do in standard NAV, and then we have the roles and logins. For the role-taker client, we work in all versions, 2009 to 2013 R2. In the classic line, we need the 2.6 executable or anything after that one. We don't really care about the application because we have no changed objects. It's completely new objects you import to begin with. Currently, it's translated to 8 languages, and the list is on the screen here. So let me look at the roles and logins portion first. As an end-user company, that costs $2,000 for an end-user to add it to $2,500, or around 2,000 euros, actually. The key feature is the ability to record permissions. We can basically go and use a SQL profiler against the database, record a user's task, and we will create a role that matches those one. On top of that one, we add a source code analyzer, because one thing is recording. You only get the permissions for exactly what you did. You didn't get all the lookups, you didn't get all the other things in there. And that's what the source code analyzer do. We give you read permissions for table relations, indirect reads for flow fields. We give you all the fact boxes on pages and things like that one. When you created the roles, the next big thing in the vision is the complexity between all the roles, all the companies, and all the users. We actually do grouping both of roles and companies, and can do permission as user ID. So that's simplified that whole maintenance task to a very high degree, actually. We also do restore points. It means basically when you're modifying security, nobody is affected, and you don't need to be a super user to do it either. When you want to change it, that's when you hit publish, and that's when we create a restore point. So if everything goes wrong, nobody can work, you can basically roll back to the previous permissions in here. You also have a way of dealing with object level security. A lot of times you want to lock people out of certain objects, like the GL entries page, for example, and things like that one. We have a list of denied objects, and then we maintain all the one the user can actually run in a role. But let's look at this one. I'm going to do this one in 2013 in here. So let me just close this PowerPoint because it gets annoying. So if we look at it under Easy Security in here, first of all, we have a role center, and I can look at my logins in here. So if I have a new user, Peter, and somebody just told me I need to have the same permissions as John, That's actually all I'm going to do in here. And then, of course, I will need to publish. And then Peter will have his new permissions in here. If I take a look at John instead, I'll go in and say, okay, instead of assigning individual roles, I'm going to assign a group of roles. And I can look at the list in here. And we have, right now, we have a whole list of groups in here. One of them is customer service, and I'm going to select that one in here. Same thing, if you have many companies, it gets really complex because a lot of times you want people to have access to all companies, except maybe a few of them. And in my database, I have 3 companies in here, and this user needs access to 2 of them. So we created a company called, or group called operations, and that's basically what I'm going to assign to the user in here. We can also deal with expiry. So if the user for some reason needed to have super permissions for just a few days, I can go in and, if you notice that I'm using the German database here, by the way. So we can go in and put in an expiry date on it. And I will say, okay, on the 7th, that's not going to be active any longer. It's actually not going to delete the line. The only thing it's going to check is this field. And you can manually use that during an upgrade. So when you're switching from your current permissions to a new set, you basically say, oh, all these ones should not be active. And then you try the new one. If it don't work out, you just reverse those ones. Let me just go here and say update login. And what that basically do is created all the data that needs to be pushed. So it created the 34 access controls, the combinations down here, but it also created something called summary permissions. And if I take a look at my summary permission, this one is a lot of the times what your auditor is asking for. And they will say, can you tell me what permissions this user has to my vendor ledger entry? Can you tell me what the permissions this user has in that table and so on? So this one is an easy way of getting all that information out of the system in here. We also have a whole bunch of where used. So if you're really looking at saying, okay, why did he got that insert permission? We can actually see that the vendor ledger is in 115 rows. There's some recordings and all kinds of things in here where the vendor ledger entry is. That's why I didn't do what I expected in here. I left the check mark in. So now I've got fewer. Now I actually know up here that he has full access to that one. So this one again is kind of a nice to have. The real feature in here is where you save all the time when you create new roles in here. So if I wanted to create a new role, I want to start my SQL Server profiler. And I basically want to go in and say, that's the SQL Server I want to work against. I could go in here and say, I only want a certain user. I only want one SQL database. All kinds of things like that one I could filter on. Since I'm the only one in this database right now, I'm just going to run this one. And it now sets here a few things happening inside NAV. But let me go in and edit a customer in here. So I'll basically go in and find 10,000 in here. And I just put in, I don't know what that is in German, but I'm just going to put in that his office is in number 120 in here. Basically modifying a single field in here. Then I'm going to stop the trace, save it as a trace XML file. And I don't want to save it in that one. Then I go back to my rotor client and say, okay, let's take a look at the roles now. I want to create a new one, and it should be called Edit Customer. Then instead of adding permissions directly to the role itself, we actually add it to a recording in here. The reason for using a recording is if we do it that way, we can use the same recording for many different roles in the system, or permissions as called in here. So if you do a new customization to the customer's database, there's typically one or two things that breaks in there, and or changes permission requirement. Then you maybe need to modify 10, 15 roles in the system. You can do one little recording of that new process, attach it to all the roles, and you actually corrected it in here. One thing about this import of the SQL profiler, by the way, it also gives you the duration, the reads, the writes, and so on. So if you have a performance issue, this one is actually like the old client monitor, because you can drill down on any of these numbers and actually see each individual transaction, what table is associated with it, and so on underneath. But let me just edit this list because I don't want this one in here. You can select only certain transactions, especially if you do intercompany. That's really nice because it actually knows that these transactions are in different companies, in different databases, and so on. So I'm going to include these ones. And editing a single customer in the system was actually 58 permissions in here. If I take a look at those permissions, I'll see all the table data, but I also know about all the pages that executed. And since we can deny access to pages by recording all the pages in here, it actually gives the user the ability to run these denied pages in the system now. But this one is one thing. That was the recording, and that's kind of cool. But the nice thing about this one, when I update the role, my 58 permissions got to 137 because it just solved all the problems that I normally have with recording. It goes in and say, I recorded permissions down here for my customer. I had read and modify. We abbreviate the permissions, by the way, to make it easier to overview. And when you have int or modify permission to the customer, you should really be able to look up to all the table relations. So that's what all these additional ones are. We also have additional indirect permissions, and that's flow fields. You can calculate the total, but you can't hit the drill down because you're not allowed to see the entries, only the total. If I go down and look at the objects down here, I recorded some of the objects, like my customer list in here. But I didn't do all these fact boxes in here because I was not using those ones. So because I actually had those fact boxes in the source code analyzer, it gave me those ones. So different user using different setup. If I was doing this one in 2009, by the way, it would do the assumption that forms and pages uses the same number. So it would actually give you the same permission for both sets. So you can record in Classic, it works in Rotail or the other way around. So these two things are really the key for the roles and logins. And let's just go in here and say I wanted to go to my role group customer service. I really want to create a new line down here. I want to have my new edit customer in here. So I just added something in here to my role group. So I'm now done with all the changes. I want to go publish my permission to actually make them active. And this one is where you need to be a super user. Until this point, you only need access in this company to this application and nothing else. So if you're looking at Sarbanes-Oxley, they have a lot of things about IT people being able to control permissions. We actually handle all that one in many different ways. One thing is here for sure, we only allow them to change the data, but not actually activate it at that point, so somebody can review it. We even have a way to lock down IT people so they can't change their own permissions or any other IT people's permission. And in that way, you completely are into the terms of Sarbanes-Oxley at that point. So I should have done this one before. Now we're waiting for objects to compile, I guess. What we do is actually a complete test of the objects in here. So we ensure that you don't assign objects in a role manually or something like that one, or you assign a role that the role don't exist and things like that one. So it's a complete consistency check of the solution in here. We also, we have a role called all free in here. We also recalculate every role in the system. It basically means if you do a new change, you run the source code analysis to pick up those changes. Then when you publish next time, a lot of these extra permissions are going to be added to your existing roles. So it even means probably 50–75% of the times, you don't even have to do anything when you change the system except you republish. Now it's creating a restore point from live, and that's basically the last step before it actually pushes the new permissions to the live system. The way it pushes the permission is only the differences. So you can log in at any time during this process, and you actually still have a working system. You only have the new permissions or the removed permissions, depending on what time you log in. So working with the object table is pretty slow in 2013. This process, by the way, it's mainly that objects information. It's about all the 4,000 objects in this database. So if you add hundreds of users more, it's not really going to slow down this one. We have some companies that use this system that have 1,700 users that they actually maintain with Easy Security. They have 6,000 users in total, but the biggest database is 1,700 users actually. So they're not all logged in at the same time. So, but permission has been successfully published. And if I went here and looked at it, and I could actually look at my user, down here, if I look at the username, John, for example, I can see all his permissions out here, and the same for Peter and the other users in here. One of the things that is nice is actually to be able to compare restore points. If I go in here and say, I have this restore point of what I wrote to the system, I have this one that was what was before, I can actually go in here and compare and say, I want to look at an indented lookup. I want to compare Windows login access controls and roles. I want to compare it to my restore point that was one that I actually took before I changed anything. So I now have a window that shows me anything that's, say, old is coming from what I had before I changed anything. Anything that's, say, new is the other one. So I can see Peter got a whole bunch of new permissions down here, free, Chronos, and so on. I can jump to the next change. And I can see down here is actually another user. And if I go up, I'll see that's probably this user is Susan. She was using the role group. So when I added the edit customer, she automatically got that one in there. I have another user that has that added. And I have my user John in here. And I can go to the next change. I can see I have my new role. And that's basically it. No more changes in here. So this one is a nice way of maintaining security. You basically keep complete track of it. With the restore points, if you have auditors come in and certify your solution, they come back 3 months later, and they actually want to know what you have changed. You just run this compare, push it to Excel, and make it maybe look a little less techy. Then you actually have all the data you need in there. So let's go back in here and slideshow run from this page. What we have also done, one thing is to have a tool to create security. It's still a pretty big task to actually do the security because you have to do a lot of recordings and you have to specify how you want it and things like that. We have created 114 new roles, basically covering sales, finance, purchase, and inventory in NAV, all based on taking the task, an individual task like creating a customer, editing a customer, creating a sales order, creating a credit memo, all those things in the system actually. And it's really only 80 roles or so, or 80 tasks you can do. So we have created all these functional roles. We verified them with FastPass, that is a system to actually go in and audit all your security, including on the database and other things. And with our roles, we have no issues with Sarbanes-Oxley requirements for compliance in there. We also recorded 22 role centers. So you have a role center role that gives you access to click on everything, but not do any task in there. But you can at least click on everything without getting a permission error. So you can read a lot of stuff. We have a bunch of technical roles. We tested this one in 2009 R2 and in 2013. We have recorded both against the North American and the German version of the database actually. So all these changes that goes for cash management in Germany, where suddenly all your permissions between 2009 and 13 don't work any longer because tables have changed numbers. All those things are actually included in these roles that we have tested in here. So let's go do a demonstration of that one also in here. And if I go look at my roles in here, all our demo data is called E underscore in here. So if you actually go look at a customer edit, for example, in here, customer edit, we can see we have 2 recordings in here. We have one recording that is for customer edit in here, and it's all the permissions you need. Then we have a second recording with no permissions. And this one is for sales receivable. Let's say the source code analyzer gets a whole bunch of stuff in here, but there's a few things you don't catch in the sales receivable area. And we actually get those ones if you manually type them in here as permissions, and then suddenly everything comes together and actually working pretty well for the customer. If we look at some of the ones for the role centers, for example, down here, just the order processor that I use all the time, it's actually 433 permissions required in here. This one, of course, both contains all the table data to read, but it also contains all the objects executing in here. So as I look at each page, if you try to limit a certain page in the system, if it's in the role center, they can execute it. If not, then they can't get in there, for example, with a different role center. So even if you go through the partner menu and you're not allowed to see anything in sales, you won't be able to open the page in there, for example. Yeah. We also have a bunch of technical roles down here, mainly using Easy Security itself, by the way. And then we have some login that only allows you to get it into NAV, but really no other permissions after that. So, yeah. But let's look at this one, because that's really what the title says for this one is like. This one is beyond what you can do in standard NAV security. We can control individual forms and pages to the level of edit, read only, and hide. We can do the same with fields. In RTC, we control each action. So if you don't want people to click on post, you basically remove the button or at least gray it out, for example. In the classic client, we can only deal with the buttons. For data security, another part of the same application, a totally different thing. You have salespeople. You want to give your salespeople access to their customers, at least only to edit their customers. So we can actually filter individually by forms and pages. So on the list, they can maybe see all of them, but when they get to the card, they can only see the one that actually is they allowed to or they assigned to. We can also do some dynamic filtering and fixed filtering, an easy way of programming a filter related to some structure inside NAV. If you want to do this for reports and queries and other things, there's a simple line of code you basically have to add in there. Everybody that has dealt with this one know that the only real way to do that one is to write code, a lot of code. We have an install engine that writes all the code for you. You basically select which table you want it in, and then you run the install process. It imports, compiles the objects, and you're ready up and running. The same engine can uninstall all the code. So you really don't have an impact on upgrades or anything else. Basically, it allows you to do anything, even keep a development environment with no field level security code, a testing environment, you run the implement every time you overlay objects, and then you just move by date to your production environment. So let's take a look at this one. And I'm going to do it in 2013 again, but of course everything works in the older versions also. This one is totally unrelated to the other security we have seen in here. So you have a new user setup. And let me just go in and before I create anything, I want to show you that I'm not cheating in here. So if I look at sales orders, everything looks completely normal in here. I don't have anything that I changed or anything in here. And I want to go and apply some user security. So let me bring up this user security. And to keep it simple, first of all, we allow the defaults being the blank. And then only in one table, you only have one setup. So that's, you don't have 15 rows giving you permissions to one area, you just have one row, period. So if I now go back in and look at my sales orders, suddenly, whoops, my list here, everything grayed out. When I get in here, everything is grayed out. I can't do anything at all in here. If I look at credit memos, it of course looks the exact same way. Everything is read-only in here, so I can't do anything. That was a little more than I wanted, so let me go in and say for my user here, that is called user, I'm going to say for table 36, I don't want the read-only, I want the basic setup in here. And I now switched, and if I go look at my sales orders, you really didn't change anything on the list in here. But if I look at the individual sales order, suddenly my statistics came on. My sell to customer number is editable. And if I look at my shipping tab, I'll see a bunch of fields in here. But basically everything else in here is read-only. If I click on statistics, of course it will show my statistics here, the sales order form in here. So yeah, that's nice, but how is all this stuff done in here? So let's go look at the user security setup again and look at this basic role down here. Everything in here is based on each individual object. So on my basic role, I have specified a couple of objects in here. One being 0, again, kind of my default, and I say everything in here is basically view. So any page I haven't done anything with specifically showing up read-only. I could hide everything for people also if I wanted to. Let's go down here and say I want to get rid of my statistics here. I don't want people to see that thing. So I actually going to hide that object. And I'm logged in as a super user in here, so it has nothing to do with the regular permissions. If I look at my sales order, I have specified 13 fields out here. If I go take a look at that one, again, field 0 is my default. And let's just change my default to hide everything. And then I have all the fields that I want people to have edit access to. Controls are all the actions. So let's go hide those ones also, all the one that is default, and then go down and say I want to have my post and print button. Post and print. But I'm only making that a grayed out button so people can see the quick post and print if they have the right permissions, of course. So if I now go back and look at my sales orders, menu got really simple up here. I have my grayed out post and print. If I click on my statistics, I just get an error. Sorry, you can't do that one in here. All the fields, except the few fields that are editable, are actually gone in here. And there's no way you can actually bring those fields back again. They're completely gone from the whole user interface in here. So, yeah, I don't know what it did in that one. So, so that's basically the field level and data security in here. The uninstall and install engine, I'm actually going to show you that one in the 2009 environment in here, because that also gives me an ability to show how it actually works in here. I'm not going to run through the engine, but if I look at the setup, there's issues with the menu here. So let's just go down and look at my field level and data security setup. And all you do when you do this install, you basically just specify which tables do you want to use. And I don't have my vendor table in here, so I'm going to add that one. And then you put in a temporary file name, and you run the process in here to implement changes in code. You export the objects, you write all the code in the objects that needs changes in that, either because you modified it in the designer in general, or that you added the table, and then you import it, and all you have to do is compile it here. This step requires a partner license or a customer that can export in text. So it's normally, if you maintain the customer's objects, you also maintaining the code for this one. So it's not like your customers just keep on adding code automatically. Same process can delete change in code also, by the way. So you can take it away the same exact way as it actually put it in here. Let's just go show how it actually looks in the classic client in here. So I'm actually going to go to my user security setup, put in the same record here for 36, the read only. And if I go look at my sales orders, buttons grays out. Every field up here is non-editable, same way as you do in the other. So